Zane had always been an ordinary teenager, living a regular life in the quiet suburbs. But everything changed the night of his 18th birthday. He had been feeling strange for weeks, his body restless, his appetite unpredictable. It started with sleepless nights, his heart racing and his senses becoming sharper. Colors were brighter, smells were stronger, and he could hear the faintest sounds, like the ticking of a clock in the next room or the whisper of the wind through closed windows. On the night of his birthday, Zane lay in bed, tossing and turning, trying to ignore the sensation crawling under his skin. It was as if something was waking up inside him, something that had been dormant for years. The next morning, Zane felt different. His reflection in the mirror was startling. His skin, once tanned from afternoons spent playing basketball, was now pale, almost translucent. His dark hair seemed even darker against the starkness of his complexion, and his eyes, once a warm brown, were now tinged with a strange golden hue. He stared at his reflection, unsure of what he was becoming. Shaking it off, he got dressed and headed downstairs, hoping breakfast would clear his mind. But the moment he bit into a piece of toast, he recoiled, the taste bitter and unappealing. His mother, concerned, asked if he was feeling all right, but Zane forced a smile, brushing it off as a lack of sleep. As the day went on, Zane found himself distracted by an unfamiliar hunger. It gnawed at him, deep and primal, something he couldn't satisfy with regular food. His senses were heightened to the point of being unbearable. At school, the sounds of pencils scratching against paper, the murmur of conversations, and the steady heartbeat of those around him pounded in his ears. He felt the blood pumping through their veins, smelled it even, and it made his mouth water in a way that scared him. He left school early, stumbling out of the building, trying to catch his breath as the hunger threatened to consume him. That evening, Zane wandered aimlessly through the streets, hoping the cool night air would calm him. He found himself in a dark alley, his heart racing uncontrollably, his skin burning. That's when he heard a voice, a calm, steady voice, that cut through the chaos in his mind. "You're changing," the voice said. Zane spun around, coming face to face with a tall, shadowy figure cloaked in darkness. The figure stepped forward, revealing an older man with piercing blue eyes and a pale complexion similar to Zane's. "What's happening to me?" Zane asked, his voice shaky. The man, who introduced himself as Victor, explained that Zane was turning into a vampire. At first, Zane thought it was a cruel joke, but as Victor spoke, everything began to make sense. The hunger, the heightened senses, the aversion to food, it all pointed to one thing. Victor told him that he was part of an ancient bloodline of vampires, and the transformation was inevitable once he reached adulthood. Zane listened in disbelief as Victor explained the rules of their kind, the need for blood, the power that came with it, and the dangers of losing control. Zane's mind raced, filled with fear and confusion. He didn't want this. He didn't want to be a monster. In the days that followed, Victor took Zane under his wing, teaching him how to control his new abilities. They practiced in a secluded forest, away from prying eyes. Victor showed Zane how to channel his strength, how to move faster than any human, and how to sharpen his senses even further. But most importantly, Victor taught him how to hunt, starting with animals, to satiate the hunger without harming humans. Zane, reluctant at first, found himself giving in to the primal need for blood. The first time he fed, it was on a small rabbit. He felt the surge of power as the warm blood hit his tongue, and for the first time since his transformation began, the hunger subsided. Despite his newfound abilities, Zane struggled with the duality of his existence. He was still the same person, he had friends, a family, a life. But now, there was a darker side to him, one that craved something no human could understand. He tried to keep his distance from his best friend, Lucas, afraid of what he might do if the hunger overtook him. But Lucas, ever the loyal friend, noticed that something was off. One evening, Lucas showed up at Zane's house unannounced. "You've been acting weird, man. What's going on?" Lucas asked, concern etched on his face. Zane tried to play it off, but the scent of Lucas's blood hit him like a tidal wave, and he had to physically restrain himself from lunging at his friend. Zane excused himself and ran into the bathroom, gripping the sink as he stared at his reflection, his golden eyes glowing in the dim light. He could feel the fangs growing in his mouth, sharp and ready to tear into flesh. His hands shook as he tried to calm the hunger that clawed at him from within. Just as he thought he would lose control, Victor appeared again, his voice calm but firm. "You need to leave," Victor said, gesturing toward Lucas, who was still in the living room, oblivious to the danger he was in. Zane nodded and quickly made an excuse to send Lucas home, his heart heavy with guilt. The next few days were torturous. Zane avoided his friends, skipped school, and spent his time in the forest, training with Victor and learning more about the vampire world. Victor warned him that the hunger for human blood would only grow stronger as time went on, and that Zane would need to make a choice, either give in to it or find a way to suppress it. Zane was determined not to hurt anyone, but the more he fought the hunger, the more it consumed him. One night, Zane's control finally slipped. He had been out in the town square, trying to act normal, when the scent of fresh blood hit him. A group of teenagers had gotten into a fight, and one of them was bleeding from a cut on his hand. The smell was intoxicating, and Zane felt himself being drawn to it. He clenched his fists, trying to fight the urge, but the hunger was too powerful. He found himself moving toward the group, his vision tunneling, his mind screaming for blood. Just as he was about to give in, Victor appeared once more, grabbing Zane by the shoulder and pulling him into a nearby alley. "You need to control it," Victor hissed, his eyes flashing with anger. Zane, panting and shaking, nodded, ashamed of how close he had come to losing control. Victor gave him a stern look. "You can't afford to slip up like that again. If you hurt someone, there's no going back." Zane knew Victor was right. He had to be stronger. He had to find a way to live with the hunger without becoming a monster. As the weeks passed, Zane grew more disciplined, learning to control his urges and honing his powers. But the more he learned, the more he realized how dangerous his new life was. There were others like him, vampires, who had fully embraced the darkness, feeding on humans without remorse. Victor warned Zane that these vampires would come for him, trying to recruit him into their ranks or eliminate him if he refused. One evening, Zane found himself standing in front of the mirror again, staring at the boy who was no longer just a boy. He had become something else, something stronger, something darker. But he refused to let the darkness consume him. He would find a way to balance the two sides of himself, to protect the people he loved, without losing his humanity. Zane's journey was just beginning. There were still so many questions left unanswered about his bloodline, about the other vampires, and about the darkness that seemed to be closing in on him from all sides. But one thing was certain: Zane would fight. He would fight for control, fight for his humanity, and fight to protect the people he cared about. Because despite everything, despite the hunger and the power, Zane was still himself. And he wasn't going to let that change. As he stepped out into the night, the cool air brushing against his skin, Zane felt a sense of determination wash over him. The world was full of dangers, both human and supernatural, but Zane was ready for whatever came next. He wasn't just a boy anymore, he was something more, something powerful. And he would use that power to make sure the darkness never won.